Hello and welcome to Indus News live from our studios in Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Indian troops have martyred 4 civilians in the occupied Kashmir, raising the toll to over a dozen this month. During a cordon and search operations, the occupation forces killed 3 youths in the Kulgam district and 1 in Kupwara district. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communications blackout for the past 347 days. Islamabad has hit out at Delhi for attempting to politicize the second consular access granted to India for its serving naval officer caught inside Pakistan. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shamim Qureshi said it's evident that India did not want consular access to its spy, Kulbhushan Yadav. The serving Indian RAW commander Yadav was caught in Pakistan in 2016 and confessed to espionage and terrorism. In the US, record 68,428 people have tested positive for COVID-19 overnight, with a total crossing 3.5 million, while 974 more people have died, increasing the toll to over 138,000. In Brazil, 1,322 people have died, while over 45,000 infected overnight as the cases tally crossed 2 million with over 76,000 deaths. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 49 people have died overnight, increasing the toll to 5,475 with nearly 260,000 cases. The virus has killed nearly 590,000 people across the world and infected over 13.8 million. European Union leaders will meet today for the first face-to-face summit since the COVID-19 crisis. Leaders of the EU nations are expected to push for a deal on a €750 billion stimulus package. The Taliban say the United States has violated the Doha Pact by launching several drone strikes in non-combat zones in Helmand, Ghazni and Zabul provinces. Condemning the attack, spokesperson Suhail Shaheen said these acts are unacceptable to the Taliban. The details after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Indian troops have martyred 4 civilians in occupied Kashmir, increasing the toll to over a dozen this month. The occupying forces martyred 3 youths during a cordon and search operation in the Nagnad Chimmer area of Kulgam district. Another civilian was martyred during a military operation in the Kiran area of the Kupwara district. Pakistan has repeatedly urged the international community to take action against Indian brutalities in Kashmir. The occupied valley has been under a curfew and communications blackout for the past 347 days. Now, Pakistan has hit out at India for attempting to politicize the second consular access granted to New Delhi for its serving naval officer caught inside Pakistan. In a statement, Foreign Minister Shamim Qureshi said it's evident that India did not want consular access to its spy, Kulbhushan Yadav. Qureshi said Indian fraudulence in the case was unveiled yesterday as their diplomats refused to speak to Yadav despite getting uninterrupted consular access. He said Pakistan even removed the glass screen on Indian request, which was earlier used to separate the Indian spy for security reasons. Qureshi said it was not possible due to security reasons to leave the serving Indian spy completely alone with the Indian diplomat. The serving Indian RAW commander Yadav was caught in Pakistan in 2016 and confessed to espionage and terrorism. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the death toll from COVID-19 has risen to nearly 5,500, with 49 fatalities in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry says over 2,000 cases were reported overnight, with the tally nearing 260,000. Officials said over 183,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. The ministry said there are more than 76,000 active cases in the country. Sindh is the worst hit province with over 110,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 89,000 cases. In the United States, a record 68,428 people have tested positive for COVID-19 overnight, with the total number of cases crossing 3.5 million, while 974 more people lost their lives, taking the toll to more than 138,000. In Brazil, 1,322 people died overnight and over 45,000 new cases were recorded. The nationwide tally of cases has crossed 2 million with over 76,000 deaths. The virus has killed nearly 590,000 people across the world and infected more than 13.8 million. More in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic has exploded in the Americas as the virus gains steam in new areas far from big cities. But a number of states are finding it difficult to reinforce restrictive measures amid President Donald Trump's push to reopen the economy. In Brazil, anger is growing over President Jair Bolsonaro's handling of the outbreak.
É muito sofrimento para a nossa população.
It's a lot of suffering for our population, and despite that we're seeing a lack of empathy and solidarity from many government officials. Those of us on the front lines attending to cases of COVID, researching drugs and vaccines, we are ashamed of the situation.
Algeria says it is planning a law to protect health workers after an increase in physical and verbal attacks since the country's COVID-19 outbreak began. In Australia, the second largest city of Melbourne has reported a record jump of more than 420 new infections, despite the lockdown. The UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson is to pour £3 billion into the National Health Service to try and prevent a second wave. The British government has finally admitted mistakes in its COVID-19 response.
It would have been absolutely preferable to have had a much greater testing capacity early on, but it's not just testing, it's basic information flows around patients in hospital, around rates of admission, rates of movement. Those sorts of things are important parts of this as well, and making sure all of those systems work.
In Asia, India's coronavirus cases have crossed the 1 million mark as infections spread out into smaller towns after the lifting of a vast lockdown. China has reported 10 new infections on the mainland, keeping the virus under control, while South Korea added 60 new cases for the second straight day as the country grapples with rising imported and local infections.
Moving on, the Taliban say the United States has violated the Doha Pact by launching several drone combat zones. Now, condemning the attack, spokesperson Suhail Shaheen said these acts are unacceptable to the Taliban. Earlier, US Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad said violence has been high as Afghans continue to die in large numbers. Khalilzad condemned Taliban's attacks, saying these acts contradict their commitment to reduce violence. It said the US will push the Taliban to further reduce violence. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. Over to Azerbaijan, where the President Ilham Aliyev has sacked Foreign Minister Elmar Mavediarov, accusing him of meaningless negotiations with neighboring Armenia. This comes amid a flare-up in hostilities between the two South Caucasus countries. At a government meeting, Aliyev said Mavediarov did not do enough to try to resolve the conflict. Former Education Minister Jaykhun Bayramov was appointed to the post through a presidential decree. Mavediarov served as the country's top diplomat for the past 16 years. 11 Azeri soldiers and a civilian and 4 Armenian servicemen have been killed in recent border clashes between the two former Soviet countries. Turkey has pledged to ensure the safety of information about the S-400 missile defense system purchased from Russia. In an interview, head of the Turkish Presidency of Defense Industries, Ismail Demir, said Russia expressed its concerns about the safety of S-400 data. Demir said Turkey promises to protect the information. He said Ankara took foolproof measures to prevent any technology espionage when it planned to integrate the S-400. Moscow has rejected London's accusations that Russia tried to interfere in the 2019 general elections in the United Kingdom. Addressing a media briefing, Russian Foreign Minister spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said UK statement is foggy and contradictory. Zakharova said London has not presented any evidence. Earlier, UK's Foreign Minister Dominic Raab said Russian actors acquired sensitive documents before the elections. Raab said documents relating to the UK-US free trade agreement were leaked online via the social media platform Reddit. France says it fully supports Iraq in its fight against the ISIS terror group. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian made the statement after meeting his Iraqi counterpart Fouad Hussein in Baghdad. During the meeting, foreign ministers discussed ISIS militants of French origin who are currently held in Iraqi prisons. The French foreign minister said the reason for his visit is to support Baghdad amid existing dangers. He said Paris will not compromise against the enemy. Iraqi foreign minister said two sides discussed two French companies' investments in Iraq as well as military ties between the two countries. ISIS still maintains sleeper cells in Iraq and regularly launches attacks. Moving on, armed men have killed 12 villagers in central Mali as mediators held talks in Bamako to end protests against President Ibrahim Boubacar. Talking to reporters, Sangha area mayor Ali Dolo said armed men targeted 7 villages inhabited by Dogon farmers in the Mopti region. Earlier in an interview, Keita said he is hopeful the crisis will end with the cooperation of people. Since early June, mass protests are continuing with the demand of Keita's resignation, accusing him of failing to quash violence. Now, Egypt says it will not stand idle in the face of any direct threat to Egyptian and Libyan security. In a meeting with Libyan tribal leaders, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said Egypt will be forced to intervene if its western borders are threatened. Al-Sisi's remarks come after lawmakers allied to Commander Khalifa Haftar urged Cairo to intervene militarily in Libya's civil war. The president said Egypt is able to change the military situation quickly and decisively if it wants. Sisi said he will seek approval for any military move from the parliament.
The red lines we have announced are primarily a call for peace and the end of conflict in Libya. But we will not stand idle in the face of any move that pose a direct threat to the national strategic security on our western borders, especially during the increased military mobilization around the city of Sirte.
Moving on, Poland's main opposition coalition has challenged the result of the country's presidential election. The Civic Platform Party said an appeal had been launched with the Supreme Court alleging irregularities. The party claimed that President Andrzej Duda got an unfair campaign boost from the government and from state-run media. Poland's incumbent president had narrowly beaten challenger Rafał Trzaskowski in Sunday's presidential vote. The National Electoral Commission said Duda had won over 51% of the votes. Moving to India, where a scheduled caste Dalit couple has consumed poison in central Guna district after police tried to evict them from their land. Dalits stand at the bottom of the complex Hindu caste system. Living up to their notorious practice, Indian police beat the poor Dalit couple in front of their distraught children. Following police brutality, Ramkumar Ahirwar and his wife Savitri Ahirwar attempted suicide and were rushed to a hospital. The couple said they had been leased land for farming and would die if they were evicted. Reacting, opposition Congress Party leader Rahul Gandhi said they are fighting against this mentality and injustice. Last month, protests erupted against custodial deaths of a man and his son in Tamil Nadu state. Now, Pakistan-born scientist Asifa Akhtar has become the first international female vice president of the Biology and Medicine section at Germany's prestigious Max Planck Society. In a statement on Society's website, Asifa said she wants young scientists to flourish. As the vice president, she also hopes to advance the issue of gender equality. Asifa said gender equality needs to be worked on continuously. Born in Karachi, she obtained her doctorate at the Imperial Cancer Research Fund in London in 1997. She then moved to Germany, where she was a postdoctoral fellow at the European Molecular Biology Laboratory in Heidelberg. The Society said Asifa will also be the contact person for the Max Planck schools. Moving on, European Union leaders will meet today for the first face-to-face summit since the COVID-19 crisis. Leaders of the EU nations are expected to push for a deal on the €750 billion stimulus package. But the recovery plan, backed by France and Germany, is being resisted by Northern European countries. Northern European countries are pushing for the package to be a loaning scheme to be paid back by 2027 rather than a grant distribution of the recovery fund, and a 7-year budget worth another €1 trillion are among the top agenda items. The European Central Bank has also forecast that the region's economy will slump by nearly 9%. The UK's National Cyber Security Centre has accused Russian spies of trying to steal COVID-19 vaccine and treatment research. A coordinated statement from Britain, the United States and Canada attributed the attacks to the group APT-29. The statement says the group, also known as the Cozy Bear, is operating as part of Russian intelligence services. British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab says these acts of espionage are completely unacceptable. Raab accused Russia of reckless behavior to pursue selfish interests. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has rejected London's allegations, saying they are not backed by proper evidence. The United Nations has urged the group of 20 nations to contribute to its fund to tackle the spread and destabilizing effects of COVID-19. United Nations Humanitarian Affairs Chief Mark Lowcock said it's not in the self-interest of the G20 to ignore the plight of poorer countries. Lowcock said it will not be long until the problems of the low-income countries are exported to wealthy nations. He said the first world is within its right to protect its own people, but the lack of support for poorer countries is dangerously short-sighted.
COVID-19 and the associated global recession are about to wreak havoc in fragile and low-income countries. And my message today to the G20 and other rich nations is that unless we act now, we should be prepared for a series of human tragedies more brutal and destructive than any direct health impacts of the virus. Inaction will leave the virus free to circle the globe. It will undo decades of development, and it will create a generation's worth of tragic and exportable problems.
The United Nations has increased its aid appeal to $10.3 billion from $2 billion to help 63 nations. Now, Caracas has accused Washington of violating international maritime law after a U.S. Navy destroyer breached Venezuela's international waters. In a statement, Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza said it was a childish act of inexcusable provocation. Arreaza said Caracas will defend its territorial sovereignty in total conformity with its international laws. Earlier, U.S. Southern Command said the USS Pinckney had conducted freedom of navigation operation in the Caribbean Sea. The command said the vessel challenged Caracas' excessive maritime claim in international waters that extend 3 miles beyond the 12-mile territorial sea. Now in business, Asian markets are trading mixed as investors tread cautiously over escalating tensions between the United States and China. Investor sentiments were also dampened by yesterday's sharp drop as participation in risk equities continue to recede. Seoul's Kospi index is trading more than 0.5% higher. Shanghai Composite is trading over 0.5% lower. Nikkei 225 is trading 0.5% higher. Hong Kong's Hang Seng has gained a fraction. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude has lost a fraction over OPEC Plus-led reduction in output cuts. Now let's have a look at the weather updates across the world. With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest update, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.